Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Stacy Jackson. I'll be the host today. Our session today is Snowflake Migration Best Practices, a discussion with Netgear. Some webinar logistics just to make everyone aware of. All attendees will be muted during the session. If you have to unmute yourself to ask us a question, that's fine. You can also use the chat function. But please put yourself in mute so that your background noise doesn't affect the other listeners. We'll pause for Q&A, so please feel free to chat your Q&A in the chat box provided by WebEx. The session will also be recorded, and you want to stay till the end because you won't want to miss who wins the Snowflake golf shirt. To introduce today's speakers, we have Manoj Thomas of Netgear. Manoj is the Senior Director of IT at Netgear and responsible for Netgear's data and analytics platforms, including Snowflake, Big Data, and IoT applications. We also have Darren Chilton. Darren is Director of Client Services at KPI Partners. He is a data warehousing and business intelligence expert who has worked in the industry since 1999. He is a trusted advisor who has led award-winning projects, developed strategic roadmaps, and integrated CRM and ERP with analytical platforms. We also have Jonathan Tao of Snowflake. Jonathan is a partner sales engineer at Snowflake. He has experience in similar roles throughout his career, working with organizations like Looker and Teradata. And welcome to all our panelists. The agenda for today, we've covered our introductions, of course. We'll also be going through the Snowflake Cloud Data Platform. We'll hear from Netgear's Manoj Thomas, where he will share Snowflake's migration experience, their Snowflake migration experience, migration methodologies and best practices. You'll see demos of accelerators and migration assessment tool to make migration faster and more reliable. Discussion of migration estimator and KPI cloud analytics. A wrap up, Q&A, and a drawing for that awesome Snowflake golf shirt. Now we'll hand it over to Darren.
Okay, I apologize for that. The slides just jumped forward. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you, Stacey, for the introduction. I want to tell you a little bit about KPI Partners. We were founded in 2006. We are headquartered in Newark, California, and have several regional offices in North America, in addition to 2 offshore development centers located in Bangalore and Hyderabad that allow us to use a cost-effective blended shore model. KPI are an award-winning company. For the second time, Gartner have included us in their market guide for data and analytics service providers. Our inclusion in the market guide can be attributed to the utilities and acceleration tools that we'll be discussing today that KPI develop for their customers. From a KPI and Snowflake partnership perspective, KPI Partners and Snowflake have a strong relationship. KPI is a Snowflake Premier Solution Partner, and we also have multiple referenceable Snowflake customers. Our Center of Excellence consists of certified US and offshore Snowflake Pro resources, which also includes utilities to accelerate the migration to Snowflake. I'd like to talk briefly about a customer success story with Snowflake and an integration to SAP. Twist Bioscience approached KPI with an expensive and hard-to-maintain Redshift platform against SAP. KPI proposed the Snowflake architecture. We configured those SAP extracts for extracts to Snowflake. We automated those ETL processes with no manual intervention, and we created Tableau dashboards on Snowflake. So what benefits did this provide to Twist Bioscience? It allowed for consolidation of data sources and a lower total cost of ownership with Snowflake. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Jonathan, who's going to talk to you about Snowflake.
Great, thanks, Darren. Hi, guys. So I hope to just spend the next couple of minutes talking at a very high level of what Snowflake is. Next slide. And we'll go one more, please. Awesome. So before I can really talk about, exactly what Snowflake is, it helps to kind of give a frame of reference on, where Snowflake fits in traditional data architectures where customers and your clients are bringing Snowflake to the table, right? And so what we're typically seeing in the traditional data architecture is, this type of environment where there are, several different services. Perhaps specifically in the middle, you're seeing a data warehouse and a data lake working in concert together, and then coming off of that, data marts that are sort of oriented for different business units and different data consumers that need that data, right? And having this type of flow, which is very common, we start to see a lot of pain points, whether it's aggregation and data latency between the data lake and data warehouse, right? Because the data warehouse cannot support maybe Hadoop or semi-structured data. Data marts, we're starting to see data cloning, right? Or data repetition, data replication, because we just can't have all those consumers hitting the data warehouse for their consumption needs. So data has to kind of be, again, moved and replicated for their own needs in a separate system. And that introduces a lot of issues around governance and control over data. We start seeing more and more copies of data, and that becomes very complicated and complex. On the other opposite side, we typically see ETL tools that may or may not address, again, all the different data sources that a customer might be working with, or they also could be leveraging with their data engineering team a technology like Spark to do transformations, right? This is going to require a different set of resources, a different set of infrastructure to perform costly and complicated transformations that are completely separate from the systems of the data lake and the data warehouse. And lastly, not really illustrated on the slide, is the potential to have all these solutions existing either on-prem or only in one cloud. So, we see customers that are either a lot of their products, a lot of their services are still on-prem, or they've made sort of an initial jump to the cloud, but are locked in with one vendor. Next slide, please. So Snowflake really addresses a lot of these problems, and we describe Snowflake as a cloud data platform. At its heart, it is an ANSI SQL data warehouse, but because of the differentiating features that we have built in to this product, which is specifically built in the cloud from the ground up, we're able to not only solve for data warehousing use cases, but also solve for use cases like the data lake strategy because of our inherent ability to handle semi-structured data. We also have a very unique and powerful way to share data between Snowflake services and Snowflake accounts, which we call data sharing or the data exchange. And we're seeing different use cases pop up that are going to work directly on the Snowflake platform, such as in the data engineering, data science, and data app space. And really, this solution that we've built is completely in accordance with a multi-cloud strategy. We hear a lot of customers trying to get to this holy grail, right? Not only are they wanting to move to the cloud, but they want to adopt the cloud in a way that is multi-cloud. They don't want vendor lock-in. They don't want a dependence on a single cloud vendor. And Snowflake is completely able to do that. We provide the data warehousing service on any one of the three major clouds on the slide. Next slide, please. All right, so let's go one small step deeper into the architecture of Snowflake, the cloud data platform, right? And really the tiers of the architecture can be broken out into three separate tiers. The two primary tiers are listed in what we call the multi-clustered shared data architecture. And what that's describing is first, the Snowflake managed storage, which is the shared data, right? All one single copy of the data located in Snowflake managed storage. And then this concept of multi-cluster, right? So independent orchestrated compute clusters, which can be provisioned instantaneously and scaled at a moment's notice, These are called virtual warehouses in Snowflake lingo, and they work, again, on that single copy of the data in a way that they do not interfere with each other's resources. So there's no resource contention amongst each of those 4 compute clusters you see on the slide, and that really enables a lot of use cases to be solved effectively. And sort of the management of all this and the orchestration of all this, and really what makes Snowflake behave like a true enterprise data warehouse, is what we call the global services layer. It's going to really handle the metadata, the security, role-based access control, replication, and any type of sort of attributes that make Snowflake behave like the way it does. Next slide, please. Cool. So I kind of touched on sort of, and you can kind of infer on exactly what true benefits, what the true values of a cloud data platform can get you, right? What does that multi-cluster shared data architecture mean to you from a value standpoint, right? One platform, one copy of the data, many workloads, right? So we're eliminating this problem of having duplicate data sets, copies of the data. You know, we're tightening up governance around that because it's all enabled by the architecture. Secure and governed access to all the data in a way that's very familiar to a lot of experienced data warehouse users, role-based access control. And then the third one, near zero maintenance as a service. This is very important because Snowflake offers as a service product a lot of those different sort of tasks and maintenance overhead things that you have to do with a lot of the other technologies and data warehousing services out there. We bring and do it automatically for you, bring it into the product. It really frees up the time of your data architects, data engineering team to do what's truly valuable for your business. Next slide, please. Right, so we kind of saw the different use cases on a couple of slides before, and here's kind of some brief ideas to get you thinking on where exactly Snowflake can start, solving for each of those use cases. Cool. Next slide, please. Okay. I do want to highlight, and I mentioned again before a little bit on the data sharing, data exchange. This is something that we really feel as revolutionary, and we want to carry this messaging into 2020 very consistently and strongly. Right, it's the idea where you can instantaneously and securely share specific access to data sets to anyone that wants to consume that data. Right, so you have full control over the data sets within Snowflake, but you also have this ability to share that data in a way that is always a live access. So any updates that you make can be seen by your data consumers, and it's completely and securely controlled, right, by those same sort of mechanisms of role-based access control, within the context of the Snowflake platform. Right, and what is this really solving for, and what is this replacing? It's really overhauling the traditional way of sharing data, which might be exporting and FTPing a data source. It might be zipping and CSV, emailing data sets or spreadsheets. We're solving for all of those typical type of things in a way that's truly revolutionary. Next slide, please. I hinted a little bit on sort of that maintenance and all those kind of overhead tasks that a lot of traditional platforms have. And here's just a short list of, where they might fall into in 4 major categories. Right? When you think of, just from an infrastructure standpoint, setup, upgrading, patching, from specific to the data warehouse or database, partitioning, statistics, indexing, vacuuming, right? Query tuning, all the little knobs and dials that a lot of the legacy technologies have to make sure the database runs as best as it can. Next slide, please. Snowflake is going to solve and bring that all into the product in a way that is completely transparent to you. It's simply loading and querying the data. This is what we want you to focus on when using Snowflake. Next slide, please. Great. So that was a quick and dirty 5-minute overview of Snowflake. Remember, architecture matters. Snowflake was built specifically for the cloud. And that wraps up the overview. I'll turn it back to you, Darren.
Okay, thank you for that, Jonathan. So now I'd like to introduce Manoj Thomas from Netgear. He's going to share his Snowflake experience. Done some pretty cool things, and I think everybody will be really excited to see this. So Manoj, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Darren. Hi, everyone. This is Manoj Thomas. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Netgear and our products. We are a household name when it comes to home networking solutions. In the consumer space, we offer premium Wi-Fi routers such as Nighthawk and Orbi, which some of you might use today, as well as a new digital canvas line called Mural, which is used to display, your favorite art from curated by various museums around the world. Besides networking solutions for homes, we also have a significant presence in SMB and service provider market. Next slide, please. So we implemented Hadoop several years ago to fulfill the needs of some of our products that generated IoT type data and to analyze server logs. So really big data type use cases. We were using a combination of Hive and MPP database and Tableau to provide insights to our users. But soon we ran into some performance bottlenecks. Reports that are used against really large data sets were becoming unusable. So it was, major pain point for our users. We tried adding more horsepower, scaling out, but scaling out became really cost prohibitive at some point. So we started looking for alternatives. We started by evaluating technologies like Redshift, BigQuery, and Snowflake, and eventually we decided to do a POC with Snowflake. Next slide, please. So we have now replaced Hadoop entirely with Snowflake. We still use some of the plumbing like NiFi to bring data in, but our data lake now runs entirely on Snowflake. We have a variety of data sources flowing into it, most of them semi-structured. Data gets staged in S3 in many cases, then gets ingested into Snowflake via batch jobs. We don't have any streaming use cases yet, but we do have large data sources which pump in about 200 gigs of data every day and gets processed hourly. Performance and scaling is not a challenge with Snowflake at all. Reports that used to take a minute now, run in seconds. A really nice feature I would like to highlight with Snowflake is the concept of virtual warehouses that Jonathan, explained. We can spin up as many multi-cluster warehouses as we want within minutes. A matter of minutes, we can have a new warehouse, stood up. And the idea behind that is to segregate your user groups or workloads so that you can keep your workload from interfering with each other and competing for compute power. Next slide, please. The POC took a couple of, I think, Darren, sorry, maybe the previous one. The POC took a couple of months. We ran Hadoop and Snowflake in parallel for a while. Essentially replicated the Hive data into Snowflake and pointing Tableau to Snowflake. This was done only for the most demanding applications. Once we were satisfied with the outcome, we decided to migrate everything to Snowflake. The three main reasons I would like to point out was performance, cost, and ultra low maintenance. We're able to significantly reduce our infrastructure cost and maintenance overhead. Snowflake pretty much runs itself. The only administration you have to do is access control and such. Now that we have found success with big data, we are looking into the possibility of leveraging Snowflake for our enterprise data as well. Next slide, Darren. Thanks. So there are some advantages to housing all your data in one place. This allows us to consolidate some of our applications reduce overall IT application footprint, and maybe save some cost and improve operational efficiencies in the process. We plan to retain most of our ETL processes, just migrate the data and repoint the destination database. Of course, the challenge with something like this would be migrating the reports and dashboards to the new system. So we're proceeding cautiously and very early stages of planning this project. So, with the success that we had with big data, we're looking forward to, leveraging, taking advantage of all that Snowflake brings for all our data warehouses. So, the great future to look forward to. So, I think with that, I'd like to hand it over to Darren.
Thank you, Manoj, and thank you for the insight there. And I think I snafu'd on the slides there, but you were talking about what you really did as a pilot, and then then migrating off Hadoop, and then your future needs. Yeah. So perfect. Thank you for that. So the next part I'd like to talk about is the migration methodology and best practices, and this section is really about the scenarios that customers will go through to migrate to Snowflake, and we also have some demonstrations of the utilities that we use to help customers assess that. So let me kind of jump into that. So when migrating to Snowflake, customers may need to consider a combination of the following scenarios to migrate successfully. Okay, so in scenario number one, which is at the bottom there, we are looking at migrating the data. So this may be important for customers with historical data sets that they would like to preserve. Okay, so that's one example. In scenario number two, a customer that has, so we're talking about existing database code, a customer that has PL SQL, Teradata SQL, or Netgear SQL as examples, may want to migrate this code to SnowSQL to be part of their migrated solution. In scenario number three, just taking that a little bit further, right, because this is a large part of doing the overall migration, some customers might, when migrating to Snowflake, may take the opportunity to look at a new ETL framework. Okay, so they may have a legacy tool. They may like the looking at something like Talend or Matillion to work with that. Okay, we can also migrate that to the new ETL framework as well with this utility, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally on scenario number four at the top there, a little bit different, but for those customers that have a pre-built BI application like Oracle BI applications or SAP BW, then you may want to consider KPI's pre-built content, which is called KPI Cloud Analytics, as an accelerator for your migration. So let's just jump through those in a little bit of detail. The number one scenario, so we have the KPI provides an automated utility that allows customers to migrate to Snowflake from Oracle, SQL Server, Redshift, and Hadoop. This utility will minimize overall development costs and accelerate your Snowflake deployment up to about 90% automation with that. On this slide, we're talking about the second and third scenario. So this is migrating the database code with the SQL converter and migrating the ETL metadata with the ETL converter. Okay. Something else that I would like to introduce here is the analyzer utility, which is used to assess the objects in your environments. This is very important. It'll tell you what can be automated versus what is manual. And it has some output for you, which is essentially a project plan with an overall cost to complete the migration. So a little bit more information about the SQL converter. Okay, I'll just kind of hover on this slide for a little bit so everybody can absorb it. So we have a variety of source SQL that can be converted to Snowflake, as shown here. In today's demonstration, which Simon's going to do, of the SQL conversion tool, we will be demonstrating Teradata to SnowSQL. And likewise, for number three scenario, the ETL converter, okay, we have a variety of ETL metadata that can be converted to a variety of targets that work well with Snowflake. So in today's demonstration, Simon will also walk you through the ETL conversion tool, where he will be demonstrating an Informatica to Talend migration. Okay. And then I touched on the analyzer tool earlier, which is a key part of what we offer to customers that are planning migration. So the database migration analyzer tool can be used against your existing implementation to assess the migration. The output, which is the calculator, will provide the overall cost and timeline for the effort, okay? So I'm going to hand it over to Simon. He's going to do a demonstration, then I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about, that calculator, the information it provides, yeah, and some next steps for everybody. So with that, Simon, over to you. I'll let you share your screen, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Darren. Hi, everyone. Can everyone see my screen? Darren, is it visible? Okay, I think everyone can see the screen.
It is visible, Simon. Sorry.
Great, thank you. Today, I will be demonstrating some of the capabilities of our code converters. While the converters can handle diverse scenarios for different source and target technologies, today I'll cover two particular scenarios. One is converting Teradata to Snowflake SQL, and the other one will be about converting Informatica code to Talent, and at the same time replatforming the underlying databases from Oracle to Snowflake. Both scenarios are rather commonly encountered in our practice. So what you see in front of you is our conversion workbench that can host multiple projects. I'm going to go into the project that has to do with Teradata to Snowflake conversion, and I'll quickly explain how projects are organized and how this software can be operated. So first thing that I need to do within the software is specify what type of technology I'm converting from and to. So those could be completely diverse technologies, could be ETL to SQL, SQL to ETL, or ETL to ETL. In the next screen, I'll specify a set of configuration parameters. So this is very important because most of our converters base their work on configurations, and those configurations include some of the best practices plus some of the customer preferences that are very specific to a particular enterprise. Once I have the project set up, I can go into my conversion screen. And what I have in the conversion screen, and this is where the majority of the work will take place, is my entire inventory of code that is to be converted. I can sort through my inventory. I can filter by statuses, by categories, by perhaps error messages, level of complexity. But most importantly, I can click on any of my scripts, and what the converter will show me is the original code. In this case, it's Teradata or BTEC code. And once I click on the convert button at the bottom of the screen, the converter will show the converted code. My choices for conversion tactics, if you will, are doing mass conversions or selecting small batches of programs and converting them in a more managed pattern. So let's walk through a conversion example. So for example, I'm looking for BTEC script, and I'm going to open this up. So at the top in the right hand corner, I see the BTEC code. It's Teradata code, which will not work with Snowflake. So I have table definitions, and I have some data manipulation language. I can click on convert script, and what the converter will do, it will apply the configurations that I've predefined and will produce an equivalent Snowflake code for me. This code will contain the new definition of the table. So for example, in this case, the collations are different. That Snowflake will understand. But in a more complex example, Teradata code utilizes functions such as months between and trunk. There are no such functions in Snowflake. So what the converter does is it finds the closest equivalent, converts the names of the functions, but also looks at the function signature, at the arguments of the functions, and will swap around the arguments and plug in some of the defaults and change the conventions as per Snowflake specifications. So this code now becomes compatible with Snowflake. And what I can do, instead of converting one script at a time, I can do select all, again, on the full inventory or on smaller chunks, and click on convert action. Or besides doing the conversions, I can also test the converted code, so I'll know for sure that it's compatible with Snowflake. Another thing that I can do within the conversion screen is I can run reports. So for example, I can run summary by conversion status, by categories. If I have any error messages, I can get those exposed as well. And if there are large chunks of code that produce the same error messages, what I can do is I can refine the conversion pattern, search for those particular messages, and reconvert the entire part of the inventory that has to do with that particular error. So this is how the SQL to SQL converter works. Next, I'm going to move on to the Informatica to Talent conversion, at the same time replatforming from Oracle to Snowflake. So this is a very typical Informatica mapping that contains sources, source qualifiers, lookups, expressions, targets. There's nothing out of ordinary in here. Now, in order for me to convert that to Talent and at the same time replatform it, what I need to do is run one of our utilities, which is called info to DWS. And what it takes is the source file name where Informatica metadata resides, the output folder where I want to generate the Talent code, and I can tackle either one XML file at a time, or I can tackle the entire project in one shot. So this is going to be my output folder. I'm going to run this converter utility, and it produces code that's compatible with Talent. And again, as far as my specifications were concerned, I told the converter that I need to replatform my Oracle components into Snowflake. So I'm going to go into Talent and import the generated jobs. The converter also produces supporting constructs such as context groups in Talent. So it's a repository. I'm going to go ahead and open up the converted job. And what we'll see on the screen is an equivalent of Informatica job expressed in Talent. So the structure of the job got converted, as well as the transformations, and all the lookups got converted into Snowflake equivalents. So instead of seeing Oracle, for example, as my lookups, I see Snowflake components. The SnowSQL got converted as well as needed, and the converter plugged in some of the conventions that are compatible from Talent. My next presentation is about the analyzer results. So as Darren mentioned, one of the steps within the conversion project is to run the analyzer to understand the scope of the project at hand. Once the analyzer utility is run, it produces an Excel file with a set of sheets. So the sheets range from summary down to details that can help us with scoping of the project, as well as doing the actual conversion of the project, because they talk about patterns. So the first sheet, the summary sheet, talks about the total inventory that we have at hand, total number of mappings. This is Informatica, as well as the breakdown of complexity categories. So this is important because this will feed into the pricing and duration calculator based on these characteristics. I'm going to open up the next tab really quick. So this tab is more of a detail analysis of every job, again, at more or less high level. So it lists all the jobs that occur in the inventory that the analyzer went through. And it categorizes every job as medium, low, or complex or very complex category, as well as provides a number of transformations or components that occur in each job, and the rationale for marking the jobs as complex or low complexity and so on. And there's an algorithm that we use that takes into account quite a few variables to determine the complexity. And again, this the exercise of running the analyzer will tie into producing the pricing and duration estimates when it comes to implementing the project. Over to you, Darren. I believe I'm done.
Simon, fantastic. Just share my screen here again. As an ex-Informatica developer, I can tell you that I'm impressed. I really am. So great. So we walked through the analyzer at the end. The analyzer. So we went through the SQL converter, the ETL converter, and at the end, Simon touched on the analyzer and the calculator. So that was a demonstration. And then, here's an example of that calculator, right? So what does this provide to you, right? So one of the first things that when you're starting to look at this data migration is, right, it's going to take you time to work through this information, right? And, you know, a lot of people just don't have the time available in their teams to do that, but know that Snowflake can provide that value that they're looking for. So by using this calculator, right, we can cut a large corner off this and, you know, get an estimate out there as to what's involved. Yeah. So it will tell you what objects can be automated and what objects will need to be migrated manually, right? Because there are those that will be migrated manually. This information can be broken down in several ways. In this particular example, what it will take to do that manual conversion work, what is the testing effort, what is the deployment effort. Then dependent on your resource mix, it will also provide the overall cost and timeline for the effort, okay? So very useful information there to help you in that decision-making process as you move forward, okay? The final scenario, just kind of looping back here, that we talked about was, so again, if you have a customer with a pre-built application like the Oracle BI application, SAP BW, etc., then you can leverage our pre-built code, which is KPI Cloud Analytics. It's a comprehensive pre-built analytics solution built for the lines of business primarily, leveraging the best practices of Snowflake, so that columnar technology, with the customer choice of visualization or BI platforms, right? So in this particular visual here, you can see that it can be deployed on Azure or AWS, yeah, okay? And what can you get with that, okay? So, you know, we have all these pre-built modules that include real-time, batch metrics, and dashboards over a variety of modules, yeah? So let me give you an example of what that looks like in the dashboards for the financial area, okay? So there's some visuals for you. So with that, I would like to wrap up, and then we'll move to Q&A. So in today's session, I hope everybody's got some meaningful information from it, but I'll kind of just touch on the points again, right? Okay. You know, Snowflake is the leading cloud data platform out there, okay? You know, Netgear have talked about their performance improvement and cost savings by migrating to Snowflake. You know, KPI, you know, has delivered, amongst others, you know, success to Snowflake customers such as Netgear and Twist Bioscience. KPI, as you see today, brings, you know, multiple utilities and methodologies to accelerate that migration to Snowflake, whether it be, you know, data migration, ETL migration, database code migration, or pre-built solutions to replace data warehouses. We've got all that in our toolbox that you can leverage, yeah, okay, which accelerates your timeline and lowers your overall cost of implementation. Finally, KPI's partnership with Snowflake is mature, and, you know, we have certified Snowflake professionals that can guarantee success, yeah. So wanted to touch again on the main points of, you know, today's presentation, right? We have a automated migration assessment tool that can be run against your database code, and your ETL, okay? And it can provide you meaningful information, okay? Again, it provides this meaningful information in the form of a calculator. You can put your parameters into this, okay? We'll put our parameters into it also. But the output, it's, and here I have an example, it will provide you information again regarding the objects that can be automated, will need to be manually moved, what can be done from a SQL and ETL perspective, you know, and it can be broken down by the manual conversion efforts, the testing efforts and deployment, and then ultimately the software costs, the number of resources you provide will provide you an overall cost and timeline moving forward, yeah, okay? So here are the next steps for, you know, everybody on the call today. I hope you've got some meaningful information out there. Let's put it into practice, and you know, what I would ask you to do is if you believe that you want to migrate to Snowflake, and you believe that, you know, KPI and Snowflake together, you know, can accelerate that process for you, reach out to us at info@kpipartners.com. We'll absolutely come out, and for free, no cost, we will run the migration estimate tool on your current data platform, right? The result of that will be a project plan and a cost estimate to migrate to Snowflake, okay? So I believe with that, Stacey, I'd like to switch back over to you, and I believe hopefully we've got some questions as we've gone through the webinar, and you can ask them now.
We have had quite a few come in the last few minutes, so let's get started. The first question, what is the conversion efficiency of your tools? And that one's for Simon, I believe.
Yes. So it really depends on what technology we're converting from and to. We take into account the incompatibilities between technologies. So it could be ETL to SQL, SQL to ETL, or ETL to ETL. Typically, we see a ratio of about 65 to 95% automated conversion. And especially in the beginning of the project, we train the converter to understand the patterns, and we give the user the ability to inject more and more patterns. So perhaps on the first run, it's going to be 65 to 70%, but as you go maybe 2 weeks into the project, you'll get probably to the point of 80% and higher of automated conversion.
Another question, I think, for you, Simon, and a couple of people asked this. Can you convert from Informatica to SnowSQL?
Yes, we can. We can tackle several flavors of Informatica metadata, and we have converters that can convert into SnowSQL or perhaps SnowSQL wrapped into Python framework. We support multiple options.
Okay. Manoj, we have a couple of questions for you. The first one, can you categorize the types of financial cost savings you receive by moving to Snowflake?
It's primarily infrastructure. We were, running into cost, hurdles trying to scale Hadoop out. So primarily, we ran the Hadoop cluster in the cloud. So scaling out, adding more data nodes to the cloud, that we run into a limit at some point, right? So you can only scale out so much. So primary infrastructure, and there's some benefits to cutting down on maintenance as well. So with Hadoop, we had to maintain a team of administrators to manage the cluster around the clock. So with Snowflake, that went away as well because it's very low maintenance. As I mentioned, it's mainly providing users access and access control and such. There's barely anything you need to do in terms of performance. I hope that answers the question.
Great. Here's one for you, Jonathan. What is the difference between data exchange and data sharing?
Yeah, great question. So data exchange is, think of like a marketplace where people can share and essentially publicize exactly what data sets that they want to share. Both those could be generalized data sets or specific to consumers as they want to sort of opt in and access that data. But data sharing is, you are correct, the underlying mechanism that supports the data exchange. So closely related, and one is sort of built on top of the other.
Right. Darren, what is the typical time frame to migrate to Snowflake?
Okay, I mean, it can be a little bit subjective depending on what you're doing. I do have one example that I got out earlier that we did with a customer. So we migrated about 4 terabytes of data, and this particular example was Oracle, and we repointed the ETL process, right? So it pretty much fell into an 8-week process to step through that. There was a high level of automation on that because we weren't wandering into anything that was overly complex that Snowflake couldn't deal with. There's a few things we had to do manually. But in terms of getting the data moved and repointing the ETL process, was 7 to 8 weeks, yeah. And at least 2/3 of that is actually just making sure that you do the conversion testing, okay? So that moves pretty quickly, right? So from a cost perspective, it's about a 60, about a 2/3 reduction in cost over doing this manually, right? So it brings it down significantly, and as you can imagine, it brings the timeline down significantly as well. Other customers will wander into, they'll need to make, considerations for some of their analytical reporting that goes on top of that as well. And again, you just have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis, depending on if you're changing tools or, the number of reports out there that maybe need to be repointed, right? So that's a little bit more subjective.
All right. So we have some more questions that I'm reading through. Let's see. Here's a question about, can you use the converter to convert legacy ETL jobs to Boomi?
And that's probably for me, right?
Yes.
Simon. We don't have the writer for Boomi. The way our converters are organized is that we have a set of readers and writers, and there's an agnostic layer in between that allows us to really quickly build out new readers and writers. So a typical effort for building a new writer is anywhere between 3 and 5 weeks, I would say, but we do have readers already for legacy ETL platforms, so it's definitely doable.
Another question we received, what kind of conversion or tooling is available to move the data consumer to Snowflake?
Data consumer, I guess, not really sure on what's being asked in this question. The data consumer is, when I use that term in the context of the data exchange, that's assuming that they are also on the Snowflake platform. Now there is a situation where, as a producer of data on Snowflake, you can create what are called reader accounts, in which you can kind of give read-only access to a data set if your consumer does not have Snowflake. But for that true sort of data exchange experience where you're able to instantaneously share data and then have your consumers pick it up and integrate it within their own data environment, that's kind of Snowflake account to Snowflake account, that experience. So hope that helps.
And the same person that posed that question, I don't know if this goes with that question or if it's just for Manoj, but how the migration of Snowflake impacted the DevOps team at Netgear? How did it impact the DevOps team?
Definitely, it's made their life easier, but we maintained a lot of the DevOps processes that we used to have with Hadoop in the Snowflake environment as well. So, but it's the constant monitoring of hardware and services within the Hadoop environment is what went away. So there was always fire in some corner with the Hadoop clusters that we ran. So we had to have an eye on it around the clock. So that definitely went away with Snowflake. But the DevOps processes are simplified but still in place.
All right. Let's see. There's several questions. Can the KPI migration tool convert the SAP HANA queries to Snowflake, or will it connect to Informatica repository directly? I think those go together. No, those are two separate readers. Sorry. So the first one about the SAP queries to Snowflake. Sorry.
Right. So we can convert pretty much any SQL-based system into Snowflake. If it's not a SQL-based system, then we can plug in the syntax for that source system and still convert to Snowflake.
All right. And that second part of the question actually goes with this first question. In Informatica to, I guess it's Teland ETL conversion, do we need to feed Informatica mapping XMLS to ETL converter, or will it connect Informatica repository directly to the Informatica repository directly?
The ETL converter expects the XML exports to be accessible. It does not connect directly to Informatica repository. One of the reasons is that we don't want to be too intrusive connecting to production environment of the customer.
And Stacy, this is Sid. On the SAP question, if it's a little bit more of a detailed response on that one, so if they can just email info@kpipartners.com, we'd be happy to follow up with a more specific conversation around SAP and HANA.
All right. And then there's a question about, have you completely moved all data from big data to Snowflake? And how are end users who were connecting to Hadoop using Python, et cetera, how are they doing on Snowflake? I guess that is probably for Manoj.
Yeah, so yes, we have decommissioned our Hadoop cluster, so we're entirely off of Hadoop. So our Python type workloads we still use. So we migrated our Python to repoint to there's a connector that's available within. We use PySpark on Databricks, and we have migrated that over to Snowflake. There's a connector available, and all those workloads are still available and running.
And Manoj, what? I just had another question for you, and I lost it on my page. What other related technologies did Netgear evaluate against Snowflake, and how would you characterize the main differences?
So we only did a POC with Snowflake after doing some due diligence in our analysis. So we evaluated BigQuery and Redshift. This was a while ago, but I don't have any POC type statistics available. But so what we found was there was some concerns with how the BigQuery is licensed, so which kind of tilted us towards Snowflake. It was easier to understand and manage. And when it came to Redshift, so my impression was Snowflake is a newer generation of MPP type solution as opposed to Redshift, which in terms of administration, what I found was that there's still a lot of overhead and maintenance involved. For instance, if you have to add some concepts like clustering after the fact, there was some work to be done in terms of purging and reloading the data and such, which seemed like a lot of maintenance just for that kind of activity. But with Snowflake, that we didn't have to get into all that. So some of those reasons led us to try Snowflake out, and it worked out for us. So we didn't have to revisit that question again.
Manoj, what were your savings this move to Snowflake?
We cut our data lake cost end to end by about a third, I would say. Yeah. Right. So it's mostly on the infrastructure side, and like I mentioned, also is reduced maintenance.
Jonathan, I think this question would be for you. And let's see, where did it go? Does Snowflake offer data quality features, rules, controls?
Not specifically. So that, typically data quality is done by a third-party tool when you think of like, data lineage or data steward type services. When it comes to sort of database specific type of operations like referential integrity or foreign key, primary key enforcement, Snowflake actually doesn't do that either. So that these type of relationships, right, would have to be done in some sort of script or other ETL process to just keep those things in check. Yeah, that's not built into the service currently.
And another one for you, Jonathan. Does Snowflake provide row column level security out of the box?
Not out of the box. We're looking into column level security. So our product team is looking into it. There's no timeline on that. Row level is typically not done by the data warehouse. I mean, typically that's done by like the BI tool, whichever way the business users are consuming the data is typically how row level security is being done in multi-tenant type data sets. But when it comes to column level security, it is on the roadmap. We're currently leaning on some great third-party vendors to provide data masking and obfuscation type services to enhance Snowflake.
So I think that wraps up the majority of the questions.
I was just going to say, Jonathan, I just wanted to add to that I do have a customer that requested that particular level of security. So I don't want to go into too much detail, but obviously that can be done, and that proposal's been made to them. So it's definitely a valid question, and it can be implemented on Snowflake. That there's just a certain approach to doing that, which I think is actually a Snowflake guideline or process that you just follow. So just wanted to add that there.
And before we sign off, just wanted to announce the winner of the Snowflake golf shirt is Janae Starek of Coca-Cola, Florida. We will get in touch with you to get that swag shipped to you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you have any questions, please contact KPI Partners, and you will receive a recording of this webinar. So be on the lookout in your inbox. Thank you.